Welcome to the Dropping into Power podcast, where we'll be hearing stories about the transformational power of surfing from women surfers of all ages, all levels, and all over. We'll hear about courage, commitment, struggles, frustration, epiphany, and, of course, life transformations large and small. I'm your host, Sheila Gallion, and I am stoked to share these conversations with these amazing women full of so much passion with all of you. Aloha and welcome to the Dropping into Power podcast. I'm so excited today to be talking to Jeanne Fernandez-McShane. Oh my goodness, where do we start with Jeanne? Jeanne is such an inspiration. So Jeanne is 67. She is such a complete badass extraordinaire. Her whole life is amazing, and you're going to want to hear everything about it. I have to tell you that Jeanne came to me through an email. I was sitting, and I'm TMI Central. So I was sitting at a specialist office on Oahu, and this was during the time that I was trying to find out whether I had ovarian cancer, which, by the way, I don't. Yay. But I was actually sitting at a specialist to find out about a bladder prolapse, which is one of these sexy things that happens for women in our 50s and above. Not everybody, but it can happen. And one of my things is to talk about this stuff. But anyways, I was sitting there feeling vulnerable, having released my own podcast with my own story. I'm wondering if that had been a good idea. And I'm sitting in this specialist office in a just not very, I guess the best way I could say it is you're not feeling very sexy, loved, passionate, athletic, anything in that moment when you're facing going in to see if you have a prolapsed bladder. And Jeanne's email came through on my website just saying how much she had loved the podcast and how important and inspiring it had been to hear that story. And the part of the story that was so inspiring to her was where I had talked about finding that balance between how far you push yourself and whether or not you pull back, and how you find that voice and that sort of inner voice of self-care. Where is that balance? So it was really, really hit me very deeply when I read the email and actually started crying. I don't think I told Jeanne that, but I'm going to start crying now. It was just very moving and very connecting. And plus she just has this, the words were very scarce, but there's this wit that translates. And I just instantly loved her. And she confessed that she had just started surfing. And I had written back and said, I'm going to need to talk to you. So we had a little visit, and her story is just so unbelievable. And one of the reasons I really wanted to speak to her right now is because she is still very much in the beginner realm. And I see so many questions and so many amazing women starting. People asking if they're too old from their mid-20s. Am I too old to start this? In their mid-30s, am I too old to start this? In their 40s, am I too old? In their 50s? And it's not really that question. Once you even get past that question, it's this inner game of what it means to learn how to surf as an adult. It's a very different experience from what I've gathered to talking to people, watching my daughter learn as a teenager even. So we go through a very specific inner game, very specific kind of journey. And Jeanne, I don't want to give a whole lot of her story because I really want it to kind of unfold, but she's been breaking barriers her whole life. I'll just say that she was born at a time and grown up in a time when women were really still being told they should stay in the kitchen, not necessarily from her family, but that was societally what was saying. She rode motorcycles. She became a drag racer. She went back to college in her mid-20s and became an engineer at a time when I was still not a very female-centered field, or, hardly any females in it. So she is, to say the least, a force. And so when she told me that surfing was one of the hardest things she's ever done, or surfing is the hardest sport she's ever done, and you haven't even heard all the ones she's done, I was particularly entranced. And then when we talked the other day, and again, I'm giving you a long preamble because I just want to give some sort of framing to this. Now, Jeanne has moved to Costa Rica, and she's surfing almost every day. And she told me a story that centered on a time that her own self-confidence got kind of shattered. And it really focused in on me just how deep this journey is for us when we began. And it's probably why surfing is so transformational. It's probably why it's so huge, because we have to go so deep to find these things. It's not just getting up on that surfboard. It's the thrill it gives you, the feeling it gives you is so profound. And the challenge is so deep and sometimes very painful. So Jeanne, that's a very long preamble. I haven't even let you say hi.
Hello. Thank you, Sheila. It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled. Thank you.
Well, I'm excited. And you really did want to start in this place as a beginner, the kinds of things you're facing. And we'll come back to all the different sports you've done. But I'm curious, I had really asked, what really are your, some of your biggest, deepest challenges right now and victories and, anything else that you really want to share that you've been going through and that you go through every day.
Okay. Well, you're talking about my biggest challenge, and I think you've alluded to it already. I think the biggest challenge is not listening to those inner voices that say, I'm not good enough, I'm not young enough, that girls can't do sports, I'm not athletic enough, all those things. I mean, every day I go out there and I have to remind myself that I am good enough and I can do all these things. But, as you probably know as well as I do, I grew up with people saying, no, girls don't do that. No, girls can't do math, which is basically why I became an engineer. I'm like, screw you guys. I'm going to show you. I can do math, but I had to go back to college to actually, pull myself together and figure that out. But I think that's the biggest thing.
What were some of the things said to you when you were young about women doing sports?
Well, I think I shared the story with you about my parents where I was like, just about the age when I was going to get my period. And I don't know what I was even doing, but I was cautioned to be careful because I was about to start my period and I could hurt myself if I did anything too strenuous. Yeah, I never did anything athletic when I was a kid, ever. I mean, I played the piano and that was about as adventurous as I was allowed to get.
That whole idea of straining, and of course, we weren't born in corset times, but there was still, I think I've shared on podcasts before that my mom would say to me like, oh, honey, you don't want that to turn to that. You don't want to build that muscle, it'll turn to fat.
Yeah, right. No, that doesn't happen.
No, it does not happen, especially if you keep going. But that, so you had told me a story that I'm going to share because again, it comes into this. And again, to reiterate that you have done some really difficult sports. So I want to dig into this not enough piece, not good enough piece. The old enough piece or age thing is one thing because you're starting this, later in life, but you've done, well, I'll give it away. You've done drag racing, you've done rock climbing, you've done rowing, sailing. None of these are easy sports. Did you have those same kinds of inner struggles? Was it the same depth with those?
Yes and no. I mean, part of it, I think I told you too, that my parents, while being a little bit weird about physical stuff, mentally, they knew that I would end up doing whatever it was I wanted to do. That, Jeanne will do whatever she sets her mind to. And, I never liked traditional sports. I mean, I never felt comfortable doing traditional sports, but I did all these other weird things. I decided I wanted to ride a motorcycle, and then I met guys that were drag racing. And because I was small, they said, hey, you ever want to go drag racing? Because you're really little and you can really fly. And so I would do all these weird things. Windsurfing was that's kind of a strange sport too. And rowing is a little fringe, not so much anymore, but certainly rock climbing. But
Did they feel as personal? Did they feel as personal as surfing does? There's something about surfing that feels very personal to me.
I think some of them, yes. I mean, certainly rowing, when I was I'd be out in my single. I mean, it was like I'm out there by myself in
I guess what I mean, do you take it as personally when things don't go well?
Oh, it's interesting that you asked that question, because I think that I take it less personally in surfing than I did in any of these other sports.
Interesting. Okay.
I think you asked me at one point, what's something that's changed since I started surfing. And I don't know whether I brought this to surfing or surfing brought this to me. I've gotten to the point where I don't feel like I need to push myself to do something that isn't comfortable for me anymore. So there's a sense of peace with surfing that I haven't had in other sports, where I felt like I really needed to get out there every day. And I had to train, I had to do, especially with rowing. I mean, I did a lot of crazy things when I was rowing. I worked really, really hard. And I'm like, I don't need to do this anymore. And every once in a while it comes back, the whole, you're not good enough, like that story I told you before. And it'll stop me for a bit. And then I have to realize, it's like, this is not about reality. This isn't reality. This is something that happened to me a long time ago. That's triggering something that told me I wasn't good enough, but it's got nothing to do with reality. And sometimes it takes me a few days to come back to that and realize it. So I think, like I said, I don't know if I brought it to surfing or surfing brought it to me, but that's what's happening with me right now in this particular sport, which is lovely.
Lovely. That is lovely. Well, tell us that story. Obviously, Jeanne, I spoke, before and kind of got to know each other, but tell us that story, the one that you had shared with me, just that in that moment had made you feel not so good.
So I was out with one of my best surfing buddies, and there was this woman who was there with us, and she had been watching us and doing some other stuff. And at one point we got done doing what we were doing with her, and she said to me, she said something complimentary to my surfing buddy, and then she looked at me and she goes, "And you need a lesson."
Right.
It's like it just crushed me, because earlier that day I felt like I was having a really good day. I was like, I was figuring some things out, and I'm like, yeah, this is great. I'm feeling like I'm making some progress here. And she just took the wind right out of my sails. And it took me like 2 days to recover from that. I'm like, this is ridiculous, because this isn't about me. It really wasn't even about her. Maybe it's a little bit to do with her style, but I'm sure she meant to be, helpful.
Yeah.
But in that moment, it wasn't helpful for me.
So what was your process to get through that? Because I know a lot of women get squashed by that. There's a lot. I see that a lot. People either get unsolicited advice in the lineup, particularly from men. I think that's the beauty of not necessarily being as young a women as we once were. I mean, it is actually a glorious thing to get a lot less of that unsolicited advice. But yeah, what is your process for getting through that in this time in your surfing?
Well, I sort of draw on the way I've always been. I'm really stubborn. I'm really stubborn. And somebody will say something like that to me, or something will happen that I feel like is a setback in some way. And I'll feel bad about it for a little bit, but then I've just decided it's over. It kind of reminds me when my daughter was climbing competitively. She was really good. And then at the very beginning, she was like killing it. I mean, every single competition she went to, she was just killing it. And occasionally she would lose, and she'd feel really bad. And I just say to her, I said, "Look, Kate," I said, "you have 24 hours to feel bad about this, and then you're done."
Nice.
So, and I think you need to allow yourself the feelings that you have around it, but then you have to look at it from a place of reality. It's like, so this person said something that made you feel a little bit yucky, but really it doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change the surfer that I am, unless I decide that I'm not going to surf anymore.
Right. And a lot of times, we have, especially, well, I'm sure everybody that's surfing has this. You kind of have your own trajectory. Like you have your things you're working on, and your things might be invisible to somebody who's watching from the outside.
Exactly.
Really, it might be just trying to get your feet in a certain position, or it might be trying to get your timing, these tiny things that we're trying to work on to get ourselves in a situation where somebody says, well, you need to bend your knees. You'd be like, well, I will bend my knees as soon as I get my feet where they're supposed to be.
That's right.
There's
That's
little
exactly
pieces like that. So I think, and we work so hard moment by moment. We're having fun, right? We're having a blast, but you're very present, trying to make this experience happen, which happens so fast in surfing. And that's a very unique thing in surfing. Like it happens all so fast. You only get this infinitesimal moment to give it a shot. So somebody doesn't even see what you're working on. So I think there's sometimes this, when you get that external judgment and you're working as hard as you can, like this is the thing you're working on, and you've just had a little tiny victory. And then somebody is looking way down the road at where you're looking and, making it feel in that moment like you're not going to get there. Right, and you're like, but wait a minute, I wasn't even there. I'm right here and right here. I'm doing awesome.
Yeah. And I'm trying to do this, and you don't understand that this is what I'm trying to do right now.
Exactly. And you needed to cheer for me in that moment. But if you can't, you can't, whatever. Yeah. I love that 24 hours thing, or 48. I remember Carissa Moore talking about that too. Just hearing her talk at a contest. You see, when she loses, she's a complete mess for like a day. and her husband has to deal with her just completely falling apart. And then she comes back and does what she does, which is probably not what I will do. I think we safely say, but I like that, but again, it comes back to that really important moment of giving that allowance for 24 hours, and sometimes it takes a little longer,
right?
But to really feel it, I think it's really important, and feel all the stuff it's bringing up. Because again, it's that inner journey, and we have to really trust ourselves, because you will find yourself out in surf that is big and scary or challenging, some situation. And you need to know who you are in that moment. You need to be able to hear yourself. So if you've been shutting yourself down, if you've been just getting in your head completely. Oh, and okay. So here's a question for you. What is the most embarrassing thing you've done in the lineup? Have you caused anyone to fall? Have you done their board? Anything like that?
God. So when I first started going out with the surf club, I think I was trying to get to the outside. I can't even remember the details of this completely, but I ended up getting in the impact zone and just crushed. And my board went flying. Maybe I was trying to paddle out, and there was somebody who was in front of me, but not directly in front of me. I was aware enough to know that I shouldn't be behind somebody, but we were close enough that when that wave hit, I don't know exactly how it happened, but she got hurt. I mean, she ended up dislocating her shoulder.
Oh gosh.
And I felt horrible, because I know that I had something to do with it. I don't know if my board hit her or she was just trying to hold on to her board that wrenched her shoulder. But yeah, that was terrible.
Those moments are so uncomfortable. When I went to Costa Rica, and I think I told you I've been surfing maybe 4 months, when I went way back in 2001, and we went to Witches Rock, and then we went to
in Tamarindo.
Yeah, somewhere in Tamarindo.
Okay.
It was one of those beaches. And I went paddling out, and a big set came, and I was right behind this guy trying to get through the wave. And he even yelled at me don't come right behind me or something, but I did, because I didn't know what else to do. And our board smashed, and I dung his board. And in the water, he was, saying, well, you need to pay for this. And, basically I just rode my board in and was just sitting on the beach crying. My boyfriend at the time, who was a shape, he came in to check on me, and it was his beautiful board. I'd heard his, and I remember him saying, it was very sweet. He was like, well, that's what happens. We make toys and we break them, and then we make some more. And I was like, oh, thank you. And the guy went away. I mean, whatever with that, people have smashed into my boards. I mean, but it really, it's deflating when you've been a kook.
It's sort of funny here. I think, and I don't know if it's just here or there's a lot of women in the water here. There's a big contingent of women who surf here, and there's a lot of people who are learning. And maybe it's because I'm older, and people look at me and they go, "Oh, isn't that cute?" So
right.
Learning how to surf. And then, every time there's been a situation where I've come too close to somebody and it just felt a little bit funny to me, I'll just "Oh God, I'm so sorry." He goes, "No." And this guy the other day goes, "No worries. You're just learning. It's fine."
Aww.
And really, what had happened was kind of funny. I realized after what had happened. I went to take this wave, and I started to stand up on the board, but I fell pretty quickly. But he was snaking above me.
He was paddling around you. Okay.
He was trying to paddle around me. I realized it was actually more his fault than my fault, but he was still really nice. And most people have been that way with me. And I think, well, maybe they see the gray hair and they go, "Oh, well, little old lady."
Yeah, it's cool. And she's learning to surf. Yeah. There is a lot of, for all the talk that comes up in different groups and whatever about the aggro stuff, there's a lot of, depending on where you are. I mean, if you go to an expert break, well, you're going to get, that's not a place as a beginner, and often even as an intermediate surfer. You guys respect the break, but overall, there's a lot of aloha too, and pura vida, right? There's a lot of, there's a lot of good energy. I wanted to ask you a little bit about just a question I came up with, the idea of photographs, right? This is the generation where everybody is photographed, and you and I probably have almost no photographs of our lives, unless you had somebody that was really camera happy in your life. I don't have photographs for years of my life, thank God in a lot of ways. And other times I wish I did. But now so much of what you get pictures of yourself surfing. And on one hand, it's great. And then the other hand, you're like,
I know.
I just want to see myself in my head, like
exactly.
my first 15 years, nobody took a picture of me, thank God. So I was just in my head. I was just in my space. So how do you perceive that in your own? Yeah. What's been your experience with that?
Well, I think that we all hope that we don't look like total dweebs when we're doing something that we really love.
Right.
We hope that we look like the joy that we had inside while we're doing these things.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we don't.
Right.
So I think it's bad that people rely so much on that stuff. I think it's really important to remember that the joy exists outside of what somebody else sees.
That is so brilliant. I love that. And I kind of talked over it when you said it because I was just agreeing so wholeheartedly, but we hope we look like the joy that we feel. I think is what you said. And it is true. It's very difficult to capture that. The most amazing photographers, maybe if you happen to smile in that moment, but a lot of times we're concentrating so hard. Like I have so much joy, but my pictures, mostly I look like this. I just have like resting bitch face and my hands are like little claws. And, I'm so focused, but I'm happy. I'm really happy. I'm just not smiling,
Somebody posted a picture of me in one of the local surf schools and it was like I'm just coming into the whitewater and I reposted it. I said the most serious surfer in the whitewater.
I love it.
There are times when I will I'll walk to a different part of the beach where I see where all the photographers are. I'm like, I really don't want to see myself on any of these Facebook pages tomorrow. So I'm just going to go over here where nobody's going to be able to see me. And I'm going to have my joyous little surf all by myself.
Right. And it is interesting. I mean, I guess to be able to look and be like, oh, look at me having a wonderful time. And, but you're working on every part of your body posture, everything just all the time. So I think it's, obviously for elite surfers and people who are in that level, most of their frames are going to be good. But
not mine.
When you're working to get just one moment in the flow. So I think that's what it is. It's sort of like it can steal your flow. You're like, but I was flowing then and you can't see it.
Right.
So I guess I would just say, I know we love getting our pictures, but I like your approach. And also just taking that whole idea of someone looking at you out of your head. I didn't really have that for a long time because when I started up in Humboldt County, there weren't at that time really very many surfers. I've seen the surf camps up there. It's a lot more crowded now than it used to be. But I mean, I was aware that people are watching me enough to find out if they can take my wave. I mean, that's the thing. Somebody in the lineup is watching you to judge you. Are you going to make it? Or even if you make the drop, are you going to make the next section? So I'm aware that they're watching me for that. But I never had this sense of people watching me from the beach. We were too far away from the beach or whatever. Whereas here in Hawaii, and it's not like I think people are watching me because I'm so amazing. You're just aware. Sometimes people are just staring out. They're going to see everybody, or there's cameras out there, whatever. So it does give a different. And I know my daughter, when she was learning, she would end up in shots, and I still think she looked amazing, but in her mind, it wasn't where she wanted to be. So I do think it's kind of a detriment. It's a great learning tool. It's wonderful to have these memories, but I wish it was by choice.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. And I think just being able to, I have a mantra I have to say sometimes: nobody's watching and nobody cares. Nobody's watching and nobody cares, because I find myself narrating, my session, even though it sounds ridiculous because, they're obviously watching the really good surfers around me if they're watching everyone, but it just starts to be a feeling. So I think it's a interesting thing that people are facing right now. And now with more drone cameras and surf cameras and all that stuff. So there's something to bringing it back in. So there's another thing that I see happening, and you happen to be an amazing community organizer. But this is a really fascinating thing that's happening that I'm seeing now with women in the surf. And I think it's something that happens with women, period, is not all of us, I'm not a community organizer, but we build community. Right.
I think that's true.
So now that so many more women are in the surf, and now I'm learning about more and more women. Well, Surf Diva was one of the Surf Diva surf schools, one of the first ever to do this, to build a surf school community, build a community of women from what they were teaching, and then more surf schools sprouted up. Now they literally circle the globe. Now you're seeing communities, groups, Facebook groups, surfing groups, mom surfing groups. It's amazing what's happening. And this sport that, I think guys had their community and that they had their bros, they had their friends. And I don't want to just totally divide us by gender, because women are certainly very competitive too in our own ways. But it's an interesting phenomenon that I think might really change the lineups in a lot of places in the world. Yeah. So you found community there, right?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I have to tell you the story as a little aside, but one of my, the husband of one of the gals that I surf with, so we have the surf club, the Nosara Women's Surf Club, and that's the community that I found here. But one day he said to me, he goes, I want a surf club for guys. And I said, you have one. It's called the Lineup.
Right.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have this wonderful community of women. So happy that I found it, because I've made so many friends. It's so easy for me to say, I'm going surfing. Who wants to go today? And they have a buddy out there with me. It's been wonderful. It's been absolutely wonderful and so inspiring.
And there's like a mentality that has erupted today too, because I had another friend here who, she was my age exactly, so 56, and started surfing during COVID. And she'd always been athletic, but, started surfing. And it wasn't women. She just went out, and with her attitude, she built community. And just, it's like it's sort of in the zeitgeist or whatever, which is, she just managed at a break that a lot of people don't find community oriented. She would just come up glowing and with lots of friends. So I think there's also just something in the spirit of all of this and learning how to, it's almost, I wonder if it'll start generating better waves for all of us. I wouldn't be surprised if you have a circle of women out there and they all start rising.
I think that's probably true. Mother Ocean.
Exactly. She'll be like, the sisters are out. Let's give them some fun. But it is a really different feeling than surfing, which is by nature very individualistic, maybe not in its inception, but certainly what it's become over the last 20, 30 years. I think it evolved to be, you can discover that in lineups, certainly all along Southern California, competitive, people can be very aggro, they can, and not at all breaks, but definitely at some breaks. I remember being, having a guy tell me at Leo Carrillo, if you were a guy, I'd pound your face, because I was scratching for a wave, with him. And I know the guy telling me at Malibu, where I come from, we drop in on chicks and old guys, flat out telling me that. There's way more women in the lineup, but there's just also, a different attitude. At the same time, to be fair, all throughout my attempts, I've had people say, go.
Right.
Right. I've totally had that. My first bottom turn ever was at a place called the North Jetty in Humboldt County. And, I'll never, ever, ever forget it. This beautiful wave came in the sky. It was totally his wave. He looked at me and he said, go. And I just, I jumped on it and I made this big sweeping turn and flew up the face of the wave. And I didn't manage to go back down. I just went up and over the top. Right. But I'll never forget that feeling in that moment. So there can be that energy. And I do think we bring it, but I think I would have to say, generally speaking, more women bring it. And obviously having more people learning brings that too. You definitely have the women in the lineup that are not as psyched, because, they've worked really hard in that old system to get to the top of the pecking order. And it's fine that there's women out there, yay, other women, but, they still have their hunger to get those waves. So, there's a little bit of all of it. To get into maybe any more nitty gritty stuff that you're dealing with as a beginner. I know you had made some more notes. So let me see if there's anything we missed in that section. I think I'd asked you about accomplishments too.
Yeah, I don't have very many. I have some. These all sound like such gummy things to say, but there are all those little things about body position that end up being like, aha.
These are really important. So this is exactly what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So
it's like,
what little discoveries have you made?
It's like, okay, if you look up while you're paddling into the wave, you might not nosedive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you look down the line where you want to go, you're probably going to go that way.
That's right. Yeah.
And, you might have to like adjust your feet a little bit to make that turn. But just those things about, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's probably applicable to other sports, but because what you said, things happen so fast in surfing that you really don't even have time to think about it. My very first surf lesson, like way back when, and I came down here for a number of years, and I would take a lesson a year. So I didn't really count that as learning how to surf. But I remember I was taught that to pop up, you have to move both your feet at the same time. And, for somebody my age with my shoulders, it's like I wasn't having very much success with that. And I came here, and there's a gal at the surf club who said, no, move your back leg first. And it was eye-opening. I was like, whoa, I can do a pop-up if I do it like this, because I'm not putting all my weight on my shoulders.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit slower, but I can do it.
Right.
So things like that have been real aha moments for me.
I remember learning, and I shared this with a girl out the other day that I saw her, she wasn't arching her back enough. So she kept hurling. So these little things, because as the waves change, you may not make that, adjustment. So like talking from, say, a yoga, point, just like hard cobra, man, that can do the most amazing things. So a lot of people don't think you actually need to scoot forward on your board and arch your back more.
Yeah, I've read the scoot forward part. I'm like, that's not computing.
It sounds so scary, but you can just do it in little tiny pieces at a time. And if you arch your back, you'd be amazed at what happens, and then even ride those on your belly until you get used to that feeling.
I've done that. Yeah. And that's one of the things my current surf coach said, really arch your back, move up just a little bit. And the other thing he did the other day that again was just really enlightening. Everybody tells you to put your hands by your pecs, right? And he said, put them back a little bit further when you're doing your pop-up, like just below your boobs. Made a huge difference. It gave me so much more room to get my legs through.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
See, this stuff is great. It's great. And not everything works for everybody.
No.
But that's why I wanted to get into a few of those little things. Some of that's remote for me now, but I mean, I had to relearn looking down the line. Because for me, I discovered on a shortboard, and I've talked about this a couple of times, but it's still blowing my mind. I would look down the line, but I was still looking at the trough of the wave rather than the crest. So especially in a shortboard, when you're trying to hop and get that first, you kind of, you get the bottom turn and then get up to the top. I was looking down, and it was drawing me down. So now I look down the face of the wave, but at the crest of it. And it completely changed everything. I was like, oh my God,
I know.
So these little things.
It doesn't take much. It's like, your head weighs a lot. And if your head's going in that direction, everything's going to go in that direction.
Yeah. And it was such a subtle thing. I didn't realize I was doing it. I mean, of course I wasn't just looking at the shore. So I thought I was looking where I wanted to go, but it wasn't. I was looking.
I think this is where the photographs come in handy. No, actually, this is what you were doing.
No, the photograph made it look like I was looking, well, no, it was a tiny wave. So yeah, that's the truth. And I want to share this one thing because it's probably the most helpful thing anyone ever said to me, especially when surfing a longer board. And this just, especially my first 5 years, was 2 more paddles. It's always 2 more paddles.
2 more paddles.
Always. To this day, I do the same thing. I'll be like, oh, I just needed 2 more paddles and I would have made it.
Exactly. Yeah. That wave just went right underneath me. 2 more strokes, I would have had it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that, you're working on right now that's just driving you crazy?
I don't know that I'd say it's driving me crazy. Other than the fact that I'm working on it. It's just, trying to catch some green waves by myself, which I actually managed to do yesterday. It was it was great. It was small. It was soft. It was just a beautiful day out there. Really nice. My instructor, I think I told you this, his daughter is competing at the adaptive surfing competition in Pismo Beach. Amazing. It's really interesting. She's 15 years old and everybody else on that team is like way older. She's a powerhouse, incredible. Man. She's incredible. But anyway, this is like the first time I'd been out to the outside without him.
That's huge.
And I just have to keep going for it. I mean, one of the things I do, and I'm a little bit proud of, I just keep going for them. Like I'll look at a wave and 9 times out of 10, it'll roll right underneath me because I won't have it timed right, but I'm just going to keep going for it. And so I caught like 2 or 3 of them the other day. I was like, wow, look at them. You just got some green waves. And, one of them you rode for quite a while. So.
That's huge.
Yeah,
well, and I want to really compliment you on going out by yourself. I think that's a huge part of what we need to do, when you feel, because then you can start to really hear yourself. And, I had a whole relationship with the waves. Like I do really, really well when it's peaky and unreliable, because I swear I can hear the wave talk to me and the other surfers aren't listening. Like they're better surfers, but I do better when it's unpredictable. I guess that's also just was a big part of my training, because I couldn't compete with the skill level, but I did have this weird intuition that would come. And to me, that's one of the most joyful experiences, is when I hear a wave and then I catch it,
I don't think I'm hearing listening.
Well, and everybody has such a different approach to it too. Some people are, much more methodical and analytical. So your version of that may simply be you're an engineer, right? Not that you're not also intuitive, but your approach will probably be more like really beginning to see exactly where you need to be,
And that's really difficult. I mean, when I go out there with Hellbirth, it's like, okay, here's one coming. I'm like, what do you see, man? I don't see what you're seeing, and he'll say, okay, turn around, start paddling and go left. I'm like, okay.
Exactly. I so remember that. I remember probably like, I couldn't tell, especially when there's wind swell. So it's like mixed in and it's kind of choppy. I would paddle for something. And, sometimes I'd surf with a friend and they'd be like, that's not a wave. And I'm like, it's not, it looks like a wave. No, that's not a wave, like that's a splash. And I'm like, okay. Or that's a chop. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, I remember just being totally blind to that. Now, of course I see it very well, but not like some people see it. I don't see it. You watch the pro surfers and and some of the pro surfers really have it. They're just like supernatural in what they see and how they connect. They're not just skill level. So that's a really whole interesting about perception. I mean, some of it is literally just practice, and experience. That's most of it. It's just practice and experience. And the more you see it, the more you start to predict what's going to happen.
Exactly.
You guys have a big tidal swing too. So that is it 8 feet or 10 feet? I remember it's a very big shift between low tide and high tide.
I don't know. I haven't actually looked at the difference in the heights between the tides.
I'm pretty sure it's a very big height. So that changes the shape of the wave and what it's going to look like coming in and how steep it is and exactly where it's going to break and how it's going to break. And
I was out there this morning and it was low tide. It was really low tide when I was out there and they were breaking fast, a little bit steeper than I like them. They're closing out really fast. I'm like, yeah, this probably isn't going to be a good day for me.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so great to go out. I think when we can, it's great to go out on all conditions, but then it's also great to be like, I'm just going to get hurt. I'm going, I'm going to either at the very least, my feelings are going to get hurt and, at the very most, my body.
Yeah, well, trust me, I went out and got beat up a little bit before I gave up.
Oh, like, good.
Okay, we'll try this. We'll see what happens. The other day I went out with my instructor and it was howling. The wind was blowing so hard. I mean, it kept me awake the night before. It was so loud.
Wow.
And I met him down at the beach and he said, do you want to go out later? And I kind of looked out. There was nobody in the water. There was nobody there. I'm like, no, let's go now. Because there's nobody here I have to worry about running into. But it was, that was interesting. I mean, I actually didn't mind it that much. And I had a good time. But it was great because nobody else was out there.
That used to be some of my favorite moments because, no conditions were too sloppy for me. So, you would have that moment of peace and it may not be, but you always pick up a little something, even though I have a huge breakthrough, but that might be the time you get a perfect pop-up, or it might be the time you figure out exactly how that wave is going to break or something like that.
I was the same way when I started to learn how to row. I have a very, very good friend who was a rowing coach, and I would go down to the boathouse and I'd say, Kim, let's go out. And she's like, Jeanne, it's nuts out there right now. I'm like, that's okay. I want to go. I was too dumb to know how dangerous it was.
Right, yeah. Well, there's a fine line between all of that. There's like a little bit of the crazy. And then there's once you're humbled, then you're like, okay, that was actually too crazy. I know
Really,
I've walked that line before.
What was I thinking? That was pretty dangerous out there today.
Well, so, okay. We never get a chance to talk a whole lot about this, and I won't make you tell your whole life story, although it's awesome. But tell me a little more about the drag racing and set that up a little bit. And then, because I don't know how fast you go, what kind of car you drive. Like, I want to know more about that, but set that story up a little bit and how old you were and how that kind of came about.
It was a motorcycle.
Oh, yeah. I didn't understand that. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh my God, you were drag racing motorcycles.
I was. So I just had this thing about motorcycles. I really wanted a motorcycle, and I was living with my parents. I was just out of high school, and I bought a motorcycle. I lived in Buffalo, New York at the time.
So what year was this? To give us some
1970, must have been 71 when I bought the bike.
Okay.
And I bought it in the dead of winter. So Buffalo in the winter, right? So I couldn't ride it. I'd go into the shop and I would sit on it. And this is where the guy started talking to me about drag racing. I ended up moving to Phoenix, Arizona with some friends and took my bike. I had my bike and hardly anything else. And then I got to the shop and they were all into drag racing too. And so they took me to the drag strip and I started racing. And I mean, the first pass down the drag strip, I was hooked. It's like, okay, so really I just sit here, I open the throttle as far as I want, and then I dump the clutch and go.
How fast do you go?
Yahoo. Well, it depended on the bike. I had a couple of different bikes that I would race. I had a Super Stalker that I held a national record with. And the only reason I was actually racing that bike at nationals is because I had blown up the clutch in my modified the night before and I couldn't get parts for it. But my modified was it was a rocket ship. It was like this 400cc Kawasaki triple. So not very big displacement. I had done some engine porting to it and I changed the carburetors. And I think the fastest I ever ran with that was I did the quarter mile in like 11.09 seconds at about 130 miles an hour.
First of all, that was just so hot listening to you talk about the engines, but that was just awesome. But 130 miles an hour. And so a quarter mile. So is it a straight drag strip? Drag strip. Just a straight.
It's the beauty of drag racing. There's nothing in your way. You're probably not going to get hurt. I do know guys that got hurt. There were no women racing. There was like one other gal that used to race, but there were no female classes. I raced against the guys.
You raced her. And so that's why they said, because you were light. So that was the original. Yeah. It's like, oh, now were the other guys light too?
Well, the problem the classes that I was running, the problem was they figured in 150 pounds for a rider. And so I had to actually add weight to my motorcycles to be legal the particular classes I was running. But, that was beside the point. It was still really fun. There was nothing like just opening the throttle and dumping the clutch and going.
Oh my gosh.
And I got to know all these really hotshot drag racers. And it was just fun. It was a lot of fun. I had a good time doing it.
So it was you and all men, pretty much. Maybe one other guy.
Well, no, there was one gal who I knew in Arizona that she raced, and she got into it because her husband was a drag racer. Okay. So, but she and I were the only ones at that point.
And you did your own mechanic work, or you did your own modification? So you always knew you were mechanical.
Yeah, I think I told you the story when I was growing up. My father would always have me put this shit together. I can't figure this out, Jeannie. Come and do this for me.
Well, you did, but putting together a swing set or something is different than putting together, a mocked up engine. So, that's, I don't know what other things you were putting together with him. Maybe you were fixing the plumbing. I'm not sure.
Not too much, but putting together a motorcycle is just it's just a matter of paying attention to what you're doing. It's like this goes here. This makes sense. It's like, it's a logic thing. I think
people to whom it makes sense say that. People to whom it doesn't make sense. I'm not completely unmechanical. I can follow diagrams. I can't put it together in my mind. So, and I don't understand well enough how it all works. And then when I try to learn, my brain just goes, I used to fix I had a 67 Volkswagen Bug with all kinds of issues. And so I learned how to I fixed my generator. I, used to fix my clutch cable on a regular basis because they had jerry rigged how they did it and used to snap, and I would have to crawl underneath there and like rethread it and redo it. I had to put in these bushings and fixed my brakes. I pulled an engine with a friend of mine. And I took great pride in that. And then I decided that I wanted to make enough money to never do that again. That was,
Right. Yeah, I hear you.
But and so much of it is tools and access and really understanding. Yeah. I mean, I would kind of get into it when I did it. And I felt, badass. I liked my knuckles being covered in grease and, so I could relate to it.
You don't like that for a long time, believe me.
No.
Like, yeah, okay, I'm done with that.
Yeah. But I definitely didn't have a gift. I would watch the people that could really visualize it. And do what they do. And it's fascinating to me. And I know maybe so I guess it interests me enough to find it interesting that other people can do it, but not enough to figure out how to do it. But that kind of brain, it's why I don't get the hydrodynamics of surfboards and fins and waves in the same way that somebody can really think that way does. So I've had to find my own way into it. I can't visualize it. Probably if somebody put everything in 3D and said, oh, if you press your foot here and the rail is doing this and this thruster fin is doing this, and then you're accelerating this point. But some people just intuitively see that.
Right. Yeah. And I don't see that stuff.
I bet you will later when you're surfing more, be interesting because you may start to see the mechanics of a wave, which will be really fun. I was also just so fascinated by, where you were. I think you said you were working at a bike shop, or you moved to California at some point after that.
From Arizona. Yeah.
From Arizona. Mm-hmm. And you were working at a bike shop.
Yeah, I was working at this place called Denko Performance, and they built high performance Kawasaki motorcycles for drag racing.
So your whole world was immersed around drag racing.
Totally. So I learned how to port engines there and build high performance motorcycles, and hung out with these guys at the end of the day, I'd bring my bike in and we'd work on my bike. We worked literally a quarter of a mile from Fremont Drag Strip. Wow. And we kind of had it at our disposal. We could just go out and test stuff out there. So it was drag racing 24/7.
So I can see when you're into something, you like to make sure you have proximity right there. Now you're making sure you're right there in Costa Rica. And I'm guessing you did the same thing. Well, I want to hear about you going to school because, again, I think this is a really interesting time in life. I don't know how usual it was. I think you said you were 24 when you went back to school, but I think what you said to me was, you're like that you realized, or you met a girl that was doing engineering. Is that what it was?
Yeah. I mean, I was working in a bike shop, managing a parts department in what is now, I think, Oakland Honda again. It was East Bay Honda for a while. Anyway, I was managing the parts department there, and I had a friend who was a Nike rep for the NBA. And this is when I started getting into athletics at the same time. I started running. I had a friend that I worked with, and he'd come in every day and he was always in a really good mood. I'm like, Ron, how the hell do you do this? He goes, well, I run in the morning. I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll try that. And so this guy brought me some running shoes, and I think I told you my first time I made it all the way around the track, a quarter of a mile. I was ecstatic. I was so happy. But anyway, I was doing that, and
you're sort of the poster child for just do it. So I'm cracking up that your first pair of shoes were Nikes.
So they were Nikes.
Yeah. And the Nike rep brought you some Nikes. And you started running, and that started your athletics. And that's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, I decided I was smarter than the job I was doing, and I needed to go back to school. And he suggested that I go to Cal State Hayward and maybe think about becoming an athletic trainer. And then I think I told you that my first athletic training class kind of blew me out of the water. Memorized all the bones in the foot. I'm like, I can't do that. But I'd started taking math classes. And, when I was in high school, it was like, oh, girls can't do math. Girls can't do math. I'm like, screw you guys. I'm going to show you that girls can do math. And so I started taking all these math classes, and I was acing every single one of them. I'm like, this is kind of fun. And then I met this woman who, I asked her, I said, well, what are you doing? She says, well, I'm going to transfer to Berkeley in civil engineering. I said, well, what do civil engineers do? And she told me a little bit. I said, so you mean I could be an engineer and I could work outside? She says, oh yeah. A lot of it, you could be outside. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So that's how that happened.
So had you planned on going to college out of high school, or was that ever a discussion?
I actually did go to college right out of high school. I went to Buffalo State, which is now called something else, as an art major.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Ooh, a whole other side I didn't even know about.
Yeah. I wasn't a very good artist.
And then you were
But
lured away by the motorcycle.
I was. Yeah. And again, there was this revelation at one point when I was like slogging my way through snowdrifts going to class. I said, you know what? Nobody is making me do this. I don't have to be here. Not like high school where I had to be there.
Right.
I don't have to be here. So I'm like, screw it. I'm done. I'm done with this. This is not what I want to be doing right now.
I love just this incredible sense of clarity you've had in your life. It's like a sort of I know. And of course, when you get to retell your story, those are the pieces. I'm sure there were moments, but there's just this sort of deep self-assurance, even when you've struggled with stuff too. It sounds like, or you come to that place where you're just like, you do listen to you. You're like, okay, I am me. I know this. I don't have to do this. I am me. I want a motorcycle. I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Eventually I usually get to that place.
So do you feel that as a sort of, because some people struggle to ever really feel that. Is there a thing that you recognize that you start to tune into, like, this thing is really calling to me?
Wow. That's a good question. I don't really know. What happens. I just know that I feel compelled to do something.
Are there ever things you feel compelled to do and then you don't stay with them very long?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Of course.
So, pretty quickly you feel compelled and then you're like, and then the other things really grab you.
Yeah, that was fun, but I'm done. So
again, that recognition though is huge, being able to come to that place of knowing what that is. Like, that was fun, but I'm done. But this other thing I'm going to do for 15 years,
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm trying to think of the last thing that I did that was kind of like that. I was like, yeah, okay. I may have been a little bit like that with cycling. I mean, it was fun for a while. And then my daughter, when I was turning 60, she goes, Mom, you've got to do a century before you turn 60. We decided she was going to Stanford at the time, and I was up in Oregon. And so there was this ride that was happening up around the time of my birthday in Oregon. She goes, okay, let's do the century on your birthday, Mom. And so I was with my second husband at this point, and he was a cyclist as well, and he still is. And I said, okay, Michael, I said, I'm a little bit worried that I'm not going to be able to do this because that's a long way on a bike. I said, let's go do it together. Let's go, do this route together so I can make sure that I can do it. So we ended up doing the century before the actual ride. And the day of the ride was my birthday. I said, screw this, man. I'm not going to ride 100 miles on my birthday. So I did the 70-mile ride that day. But cycling was a little bit short-lived for me. I just got tired of traffic, and it just felt more dangerous to me.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, I think it seems like you have a clear joy factor, like that, you go into danger if that joy thing is, overtaking, because I know you obviously have this incredible tenacity and can push through so much. So that's why I was asking. I was curious about that moment for you, what will keep you pushing through? Like, even though this is dangerous, even though this is this. Like, when you talk about drag racing, your eyes light up. People can't see you, but when you talk about surfing, actually your eyes light up. When you talk about climbing, your eyes light up, and rowing, your eyes light up. So I didn't see that with the cycling. So there's something in that, but it probably did for a while.
It did.
It was fun, yeah. But it's more just, I can just feel this pervasive joy. So that's very cool.
Well, I'm glad you can see that.
I can see. I can take a picture of it. Exactly. Take a picture. Just thinking the same thing. Yeah. Well, I'm just looking right into your eyes, so that helps.
It does.
So for everybody listening, eyes are shining. I promise. So you did. I just want to talk a little bit more about all these sports. So okay. Well, I'll let you list them off.
Oh, geez,
once you started running, once you just did it.
Okay, once I just did. So I started running. Oh, and I did the beta breakers with this friend of mine. Oh, that was such a hoot. I'm not very fast, right? And I did the beta breakers when there were I think the year I did it, there were 15,000 people. And now there's hundreds of thousands.
Oh, wow,
of people.
yeah.
But that was so much fun. So I loved running. I used to run every single day. I worked near Lake Merritt, and I would run around Lake Merritt every day. And this guy was right. The runner's high, man. It was just fantastic. So I loved running. And then what did I do from there? I started weightlifting. Weightlifting was a game changer for me. It was a total game changer, because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, look at that. I got a muscle. Oh yeah, that's so
Yeah.
cool. And I just started feeling powerful.
Wow. Do you still
And
lift?
I do some.
Yeah. Okay.
We have an exercise room here with some weights in it, and if my husband doesn't wash the floor soon, I'm going to kill him.
Nope.
So I've been going surfing every day, and so
Yeah.
I haven't been
Okay.
in. We refer to this room as the pain cave. So we we have weights in there, and I brought my rowing machine from Oregon with me,
Oh,
so I've
wow.
got that. When I started lifting, it was just all of a sudden it's like I am a different person, and I brought that with me to climbing. And
Mm.
because climbing really isn't, it helps to be strong, but that's not really what it's about. It's more about balance and reading the route and positioning your body in such a way that you actually extend your reach a little bit more. But I had this sense of myself as being a strong woman.
Mm.
And that really carried over into climbing. And that's part of the reason I think I told you I started this women's climbing group called She Climbs way back when. I knew how it felt for me. And I knew that when I saw other women in the gym actually getting things with some encouragement from other women, it changed them. It just absolutely changed them. So I decided I wanted to start this group. And I think I told you it started out, I thought I'd see 10 people show up at the gym, and 40 people showed up at the gym that night. And eventually we had chapters all over the country.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it was but it was that sort of thing. And that's what's happening with the surf club
What's happening
too.
with surfing. Yeah.
Yeah. So all these women are going, come on, you can do this. Come on, let's paddle out. Let's go do this together. But yeah, it started with weightlifting and just a sense of that sort of power that I had. So anyway, you're asking for a litany of the things I did. So weightlifting, climbing. Oh, before climbing, it was windsurfing, sailing. There's another funny story. So I learned how to sail in lasers, small boats. I love sailing small boats. They're really fun. And then I was taking this sailing class at school when I was at Cal State Hayward. It was just for fun. I wanted to do this. We're in these dinghies. And at that time, their sailing magazine had this contest. They were calling it a pro-am kind of thing, where they were getting like Olympic class sailors and amateurs. And the amateurs would enter this contest to get to go sail with these guys in the Bahamas.
Oh, wow.
And so I entered this contest, and so did my sailing instructor. And I'd come in, I'm like, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. And I did.
Oh my gosh.
I ended up winning this contest. So I ended up going to the Bahamas and sailing there with this guy, Buddy Melgis, who was like this amazing Olympic class sailor, which was really fun. Anyway, that was part of my sailing endeavor. So
I love it.
Sailing, I think windsurfing came after sailing. And then, what did I do after that? I finished college and it was mostly weightlifting through that time, through my graduate classes, and climbing came after that. I've done a little bit of skiing. I was never really good at it, and I hate being cold. Got into climbing. My daughter got into climbing, and because my daughter was into climbing, I ended up sort of watching the way the competition climbing scene was going. And I didn't like what they were doing with the kids. And there were a number of other of us that didn't like what they were doing with the kids. And so we revamped the whole organization. And we started what was then the Junior Competition Climbing Association. And I was the executive director of that organization for a number of years. And then we morphed into the national governing body for sport climbing in the US.
Amazing.
And what is now USA Climbing. Me and a bunch of other people sort of started the push to get climbing in the Olympics. And one of the gals I was working with, she actually kept on going. And she is hands down responsible for climbing being in the Olympics right now. Her name is
And
Debbie
I love
Dowrich.
that climbing and surfing both debuted in the Olympics at the same time. I think
it was awesome.
So cool.
I loved watching the Olympics this year. It's like, oh, climbing, surfing, and then rowing too. I had to watch that too. So yeah, after climbing, then rowing, and now surfing. So
and now surfing.
I came down here with a friend of mine, a rowing mate of mine, and she had traveled to Hawaii a number of times, and she would take surfing lessons. And the first couple times she and I were down here together, there was another friend who's also named Jeannie. We call each other Deb's other best friend, Jeannie.
Yeah.
So the first time we were all here together, I think they went out and they took some surfing lessons, and I just watched. I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. But the next time they convinced me to try it. And so, so it was like one of those things. I'd come down, I'd take a lesson, come down, then 6 months later, take a lesson. But there was never enough time to make any progress to speak of.
Yeah. So when did it kind of get into your blood?
Well, last year when we moved here for real. And I found the surf club. It's like, okay, I just found my people and this is what I'm going to be doing. Yeah.
And did you feel that sense of joy starting out with it? Or that kind of, it's not like 0 to 130 on a drag strip.
No, it's a little different. It's a little different. No, it was fun. I think it was a little bit weird because it was like the middle of COVID and, there were no vaccines at that point. So I was a little bit trepidatious being around too many people, but then I just decided that, okay, this is where I am and I'm vaccinated now. And so it's like, it's all good. And spend so much time outside here. It hardly makes any difference.
Yeah, true. I hear you being in Hawaii. So it just sort of crept up on you.
Yeah, it really did. And I think it's really a lot of what feeds it is the camaraderie of, my surf mates. They're my Hiranas.
See, what I think is so interesting, and it's, you're a little bit of a different story than, some of the women I've talked to, and kind of, my specific initial focus was people whose lives have been totally transformed by surfing, but you are sort of transforming life in surfing and part of this transformation. And you're bringing this incredible life experience that you've had to this new community. And I would say the transformation of surfing, which I think is really happening. The fact that you did she climbs and recognize that community and that power of, what's happening here with women. And just the way that you said it, that little bit of like, you can do it, and feeling the women lift, like I got chills because I know what that feels like to have someone say that to me. And I know what it feels like when I say that to women in the lineup, and it's something in general that, every human does need to hear these things, but, this is focused on women. My focus is on empowering women. I want everyone to feel loved and empowered, but there is something, just even being given permission, that's a huge thing for women.
Exactly.
Permission to fail, permission to succeed, permission to look bad in a bikini, permission to, that's a huge part of this. I hear a lot of women talking about body image and all of, what comes to that, when it's such, surfing is both so incredibly natural and organic and not, right? It's difficult. It's really, really fundamentally difficult. Yeah. So I just love that part of what you bring to this whole story is transformation itself and tenacity. That's kind of the last question. I don't know if it's something you can answer because it just might be really innate for you, but is there you have this through line of tenacity, and, we kind of touched on it earlier when I was asking how you get through difficult moments and, how you recognize when you want to stick with something, but is there any little lump of wisdom or, anything that you could offer to people who struggle more, who let those fears back them down a bit more, whose voices, are there any ninja tricks you maybe have learned, when you felt beaten down?
I don't know if they're ninja tricks. I think there's a lot of self-talk that happens. It's like, don't believe it. Don't believe the bullshit that you've been fed, because really it's bullshit. And, you're capable of trying whatever it is you want to try. And you're capable of failing at it. You're capable of succeeding at it. And it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're trying. Yeah. There's this interesting story that I've actually posted on the Women Who Surf Facebook page about how, God, who was the author? I think it was Kurt Vonnegut. He was working on an archaeological dig when he was a kid and as an intern. And somebody was asking him, so, the usual, what do you want to be when you're, what sorts of things are you into? And he said, well, I really don't do much. I'm not into sports. I do theater and I play these instruments, and like he listed this litany of things that he does. He goes, but I'm not very good at any of them. The guy looks at me and goes, doesn't matter. He says, look at the interesting life you're having. Look at how interesting your life is because you have done all of these things. He said, and it changed him. It changed him right there.
I love that.
And I think that's just really important. I think we need to know that it doesn't matter if you're the best at something. It doesn't matter if you're the worst at something. If you want to try it, just go do it. Just go do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it. Just do it.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeanne. It was so much fun talking to you and just, appreciating your incredible journey that's now got you in the water. And yeah, I can't wait to see what you create next, because I know there's going to be some group or community or something's going to come out of this sometime that, we haven't seen coming. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and come to Costa Rica.
Ooh, you betcha I will.